aviating over coastal Alaska.
These beaches are still looking pretty pristine.
Yeah, again, the ones inside the sound have not been impacted near to the extent the outside.
Unless you're out there walking around or looking, and even then you see some styrofoam, you go, what's the big deal? But you start doing the environmental impact that styrofoam and plastics has on the environment when it starts to break down, and then it becomes a huge deal.
We're offering some action to take to combat this problem while learning to fly over this remote and unforgiving region.
You pop right up and over the pass and then you're dropping back down to sea level.
This is the gnarly place.
I've been hammered going through this pass.
Even on a day like today, and you go, wow, that wasn't a good idea.
So let's learn about what it takes to fly here.
You need to be flexible. Rigid flexibility, another one of my mottos.
So we just landed in like a pristine spot, and now we're getting out of it. You don't often find yourself at a lunch stop like this. The previous episode covered an amazing aerial tour of Prince William Sound, and then the culmination of my Alaskan float training where I was getting checked out in the DHC-2 Beaver with Martin and Tim from Apex, Alaska.
So where we're at right now is just off of Main Bay. The lake is probably 2 miles long. This is freshwater, sitting sort of in the mountains. Off the north end of the lake, it drops right down into Main Bay where there's a hatchery and a bunch of salmon returning. So there's a lot of commercial fishing going on right out there. This is one of the few large lakes where it's easy to get in and out with a float plane. Most access we have would be in salt water. And places like you're seeing here, spectacular as it is, you could multiply times 1,000 easy, a few thousand in different areas of the sound.
As a pilot and a scuba diver, this trip resonated with me really deeply. And I'm proud to be a part of Team Seas. We'll talk more about that shortly. But first, we need to talk about exploring remote areas like this, which meant being prepared. This reminded me of the survival shakedown from a few years ago. I did okay, but Tim explained that Alaska is on another level.
What we're talking about today is survival gear, more geared towards coastal flying or when you're flying over water. When you're in Alaska, it's such a varied spot with topography, the climate, everything that you're going to run into would be different depending on what type of flying you're doing. Mountain flying is completely different from coastal float flying. Plan, prepare, and then practice. The planning part would be, I'm flying in Prince William Sound, I'm flying around a commercial fishing fleet, I'm going to be going around the coast to Seward, so how do I prepare for that kind of flight? Going to be different than if we were going to fly maybe out in Kodiak or out in Bristol Bay.
The previous episode from this series covered the flight out here and landing into this lake for our lunch stop. This has been all about basic float training, culminating in the DHC-2 Beaver checkout. It's really exciting to be at this stage where my instructor Martin has cut me loose to manage the startup on my own.
Get one more prime shot. Okay, primer's locked. Okay, we're floating.
Master's on. All clear?
Check 1, 2, checkity check.
When we go to take off, we'll probably go around the point, warm up as we're going downwind. The wind sort of died down since we landed, but again, we're going to take off into the wind. And as soon as we get airborne, there's about maybe at the most 100-foot ridge on the side of the lake, and then it drops right down to sea level.
Okay, we're belting in because we're going. I think I'm only like, 3 hours in and I'm starting to feel at home in this thing.
You are. That's why I was on the float.
Cool, man, yeah. No, it felt good.
And you know, it's not the hours in this thing initially because you know how nice it flies and you just gotta know a few quirks. It's a setup. And the more, every time we stop, even if we stop after 30 minutes, that does you more good in an hour flight and then stopping.
Right, more cycles, yeah.
The most complicated part is where Tim shines, is because he's a mariner that happens to have a pilot license. Right. And at the end of the day, where you get really in trouble is, obviously, as a pilot, you know where to land and not land, but once you start docking, tying, paying attention to tides, winds, it's nice now, it may not be nice tonight. Your airplane's parked in a good place, but it may be...
I've literally filled the floats with water to keep it from being blown off the...
There you go.
It was blowing 70 plus. We had our tent had blown down. It's just raining sideways. And I said, look, we got two choices. Take the axe and put some holes in the floats or start filling them up, but we need to sink this just enough to put the weight in there. And as soon as we did that, we could relax. And
Nice turn. Let's go. Yep.
Okay, so we're set. Flaps are not set yet, though.
I'm going to set them now since we're not doing the step turn.
Okay, so you got flaps?
There you go.
Previous episodes cover the standard operating procedures for the Beaver in great detail.
Bring your prop back just a bit.
So this episode is going to cover more of the advanced stuff we were thinking about while executing this mission.
This is the shit right here, man. This is flying.
Martin and Tim are based near Wasilla, so it's a quick flight down to Prince William Sound, which is an area that Tim is intimately familiar with, having been studying the issues with garbage and debris for decades.
Montague is a huge collection. We're not going to get out there, but I would just blow your mind if we flew that outside of Montague with the amount of debris since the tsunami, and also from water bottles and everything else coming up from everywhere. This is a collector section right through here. Kayak Island, huge collector. This rivals, if not exceeds, what you find per linear mile on Montague. Where we're flying on the inside, you'll find debris in those areas. You probably won't notice it from the air. If you got on the beach, you'd end up seeing some stuff.
So that's another mission.
It's a whole nother mission.
Yeah. I definitely intend to get back to work with Tim some more on this story.
we'll hug this shoreline, just go from point to point as you go around. Yep, just straight ahead there.
Yeah, I was going to go right over our boat. It's going to give him a bit of berth to cut to that point.
Once you get around that farther point up ahead, one that's higher than you, just stay right to the right of it. We're going to end up eventually cutting over to the island that's got snow on it.
Please consider helping the thousands of creators who have joined up to form Team Seas. We're hoping to raise $30 million to remove 30 million pounds of trash from the ocean.
That's about as close to trees as I want to get, but you guys would fly even closer, right?
You're good.
That's close.
It's not close.
There's basic survival gear that you want no matter what. Alaska and Canada actually have a list of required survival gear, and that would be one list that you'd want to follow no matter where you're at. So what I got in front of us today is just a basic touch of what I would strongly suggest or require if you're flying with me. And as you can see, it's going to be varied what boats require, what the Coast Guard requires. You're actually in their area when you're out there. Every one of those guys is on a VHF radio. They're not on an aircraft radio. If we had to get in contact, if we had an emergency, the Coast Guard's coming out of Kodiak, maybe coming out of Cordova, an hour and a half response time, but that fisherman that's a half mile away, he's your first responder. He's the guy that you'd want to get a hold of. So there'd be a couple of ways to get a hold of him. And again, think marine, not think airplane. A lot of it crosses over. Small kit, what I would suggest taking, these are just flares. These are 12 gauge. Another big one that most people don't think about, this is dye marker. You throw this in the water and it creates a very, very visible dye, orange or green, depending on what you have, from the air, easy to see. Communication. This is a marine VHF. It's going to be very similar. I usually keep it in a Pelican case. Everything I like to have, again, think water, goes overboard. I don't want it to sink. When you turn the thing on, it's going to come right up to channel 16. That's standard. That's the frequency that Coast Guard is going to monitor. That's also the frequency that every vessel, more than likely, will have at least one radio that's scanning channel 16.
Little Alaska flying here. Some sap on the wing, right?
Tell Steve, what do you think of PA-12 like the one we have at home underfloated, landing right now in the water below us?
Oh, I wouldn't want to. Even with a Beaver, I wouldn't choose to land here.
No, just because you got floats, it's a false sense of security.
What amazing country here, man. This is crazy.
When the tsunami in Japan happened in 2011, the impact that it had and is continuing to have and will have on the Alaskan coastline and waters and salmon return, this, in my opinion, is much greater than what the Exxon Valdez had. He ended up cutting inside of the reef marker and ran aground there. So at that point, the oil flowed, you could think of it as more of a V, just sort of took off like that. I believe roughly $5 to $7 billion for the oil spill response. And the amount of money that's poured into the recovery effort of the debris, we're talking in just a few millions of dollars.
So that's so weird. It's like exponentially more damage and exponentially less support.
Yes, but it's a different kind of visual. So if people can't see it, they can ignore it. Oil's pretty hard to ignore. Debris on the beaches, so unsightly, yes, I could almost live with that. I don't like it, but the long-term impact is going to be felt for a long time.
These beaches are still looking pretty pristine.
Yeah, again, the ones inside the sound have not been impacted near to the extent the outside. It does drift in here, and there's beaches that some of us in the marine debris community monitor and clean up every year and sort of keep track of what kind of debris and how much comes in. But the outside is where it collects. Oh, there's a bunch of seals hauled out on that rock.
I saw it. There's a bunch of seals swimming right there. Oh, that's a whale. Cool, man.
Okay, so you can sort of see the cut we're talking about through here.
Yep.
It's just sort of a fun one to take more low level.
What's low level? 100?
Whatever you want to do. 50 feet, 100 feet. Once we get through there, then we'll pop back up a little bit.
I'll just stay to the one side. The boat could be on the other side.
Yeah,
Yep.
stay to the right. Good wind coming through there. Right, because the water's not calm, so you see they're coming from that end or that end, but
I think it's coming straight at us. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, this is awesome.
When I do this kind of thing, I don't try to hug the right side so much.
Yeah. Well, I just have the boat there. What do you think?
No, don't worry about him. You're fine. Most people in Alaska would just think that was the coolest thing, or they could care less because they see it every day.
Right.
So once you get through here, then just start a gentle climb back up to about 500-600 feet. We might even pop up a little bit more, but we'll say probably around 500-600 feet, and I'll bring you down through Chiniga. Maybe just a slight turn to the left when we get out of here. But if we're getting a bunch of fog rolling in here, let's get a perspective from higher up and determine if this is where we're still heading or not.
So that's like ocean fog?
Yeah, they were calling for a fog layer offshore, and it looks like it's starting to push in a little bit. I'd love to get a little bit higher perspective, and if it's going to be all on the outside coast, then I really don't see a reason to fly over top of it. And I would suggest we turn around and go back up through Whittier, which means we skip Summit Lake. Once we get around to the Fox Farm area by the Capes, we'll have a really good idea of how widespread the fog is. I wish you could see on this side. I've seen 2 or 3 schools of herring or capeland, if you see these dark schools underneath. And I just saw a whole pile of porpoises back here.
Due to that expansive sea fog, we didn't make it to the outer coast. But regardless, we were prepared for anything.
We wore pretty much what we have on, and we all had the life jackets that you have a little pull and they self-inflate. They don't get in the way. They're convenient when you're in the airplane. You don't really even remember that you have them on. Going a step or two up from just a life jacket would be wearing an immersion suit or some sort of flotation suit. A suit like this here, you can consider it more of a wetsuit because you are going to be wet when you get inside of it. It's made for pilots. You can see it's got leather reinforced for the knees where your hands always are. It also has leather reinforced where you're sitting because they know you're going to be sitting in this thing. On a day like today, it gets pretty warm inside the airplane. You're in sort of a greenhouse, but at least it's on you. Another suit that you could consider, this is definitely 100% of it a dry suit. And as you were talking earlier, this one has been fitted to me. I trimmed the neck exactly where I wanted it, but it's 100% dry suit.
And even though we were flying a twin across the Atlantic, we still went for the full dry suit because there was so much water crossing on this trip. I learned a ton flying with the chief pilot from Diamond Aircraft and got to log 25 hours left seat in the DA-62. Lots of great stuff coming from this one. I'm just still organizing it, but here's a teaser.
You greased it again. Come on. Love this airplane, man. This thing is smooth.
So watch for a multi-part series from that one, but for now, let's get back on board the Beaver.
Yeah, this fog looks pretty widespread. So you can go through Chiniga, which is Crab Bay, and there's an airport there, and we could just cut over the island going to the right there, get on the other side, and then sort of start heading back.
Oh, that way.
Yeah, we'll just follow you through. You see all the boats, that's because that's where the little village is. You're starting to see it there. And then you should see a runway off to your right at some point. And we can cut through the saddle where the runway sits and drop down on the other side.
So you see like a shadow in the water, that's not a shadow, that's a school of herring?
Correct.
Looks like it's the
Like
dark.
right here, see Martin right off to your side in the water?
Yeah,
Like
right there in a little spot.
Yep. We're gonna go right up through there.
And if we don't like it, we have an escape route, which is a 180.
When we do go through Portage Pass, 1,300 feet, I believe, is generally what I remember. So I probably at some point would climb up to even to 1,500 as you're approaching Passage Canal.
So I wouldn't cross the ridge right now. I'd wait a little bit. I got a little bit of water. Maybe on the next valley, I'll see some water on that end, and that's when I'll start cutting the corner and follow those boats. Basically, they're going back to Whittier. Bang, there we go. Always an exit straight. So the engine quits. Yeah, we're 100 feet above, but we're going to glide right through that hole. There you go. And it's different thinking, but you can see the logic. It's actually the smarter thinking. So what happens, we're going to go to this pass. We're going to go over Portage. You see that cut? Yeah. A low cut? We're going to be going towards that side, on the right side of that cut.
So the town of Whittier was pretty much built during World War II because it was another ice-free port. But the only problem was there was a mountain between the ice-free port and the town of Anchorage. So what they did is they put in this tunnel. It's about 2 miles long, goes right through the base of the mountain, and it was just for the railroad. They finally paved over top of the railroad tracks, so either the train goes through certain times of the day, and then it's opened up for traffic, one way only, on the half hour. And once they did that, then it sort of opened up Prince William Sound to the greater Anchorage area, and the amount of pleasure boating in Prince William Sound increased tremendously after that. And the cruise ships come in and out. The pass is just boom, you're right through it, and you're dropped down into Portage Lake. What you're looking at, the glacier in front of you is Portage Glacier. It's receded tremendously over the last years. There's a visitor center at the end of Portage Lake, which you'll see when you get over the pass. And the glacier used to be visible from that end of the lake, and you'd watch the icebergs coming across the lake. They built the beautiful visitor center, and then the glacier started receding big time, and it's no longer visible from the visitor center, but it's a very worthwhile day trip.
Whittier is one of those places, again, it's sort of a Venturi of where weather systems are going to funnel through. Higher pressure on the Anchorage side, lower pressure in Prince William Sound area, which is typical. And the wind was funneling through the pass, coming from Anchorage, through over the hills, and then hitting the ocean, Passage Canal there, and then blowing out. You need to be flexible. Rigid flexibility, another one of my mottos.
We got a red and white Beaver entering Whittier Pass westbound at 1,500 feet.
So those are the military barracks, like the U-shapes?
Right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the only ones that are multiple story.
Well, there's that other building there, but that looked a little newer.
Many times I've circled Portage Lake. Can I get through? Can I get through? And I'll take 2 or 3 circles, and if you see a little opening, you're in a left-hand turn with the intention that you're not going through, but when you're looking to the right and it looks open, it's just a quick right-hand turn, you pop right up and over the pass, and then you're dropping back down to sea level.
This is the gnarly place.
Oh, it can get
when the
so
wind,
nasty.
yeah, I've been there even on a day like today, and you go, wow, that wasn't a good idea.
I've been hammered going through this pass.
That's the road. If you're going back to the Kenai Peninsula, you got to come all the way around the arm. Do you see the second point on the right over there?
Yep.
Yeah, after that one, we'll be bending back into the Anchorage Bowl.
So we shot so much awesome content on this trip. There's still the arrival into Lake Hood coming. I'm actually going to save that one for when I pick up my girls who came to visit for the last bit of this trip. Flying in and out of the world's busiest seaplane base in a Beaver was awesome. There's almost a dozen episodes now from this series. If you visit FlightChops.com, that's probably an easy way to find them all if you missed them. And until next time, keep your flight chops sharp.
There's so many stories out here, but we need to go fly. I'll tell stories other way. What we really need to do is probably go through everything, and we're going to do this later. And I may say I have a life raft there, but if you've never, and I know you have because I've seen your videos, but if you've never practiced even opening up one or knowing how it's going to deploy itself, it does you no good. I may say there's a sat phone in that case, or there's a VHF radio. So you've planned, you've prepared, but you've never practiced. You don't even know how to turn it on. You don't know that you have to put the antenna on first because it's in a little Pelican case. So you really need to be able to almost second nature, just like when you're first flying a new airplane, you're behind the power curve, you know it. Someone else may look and go, hey, he's a great pilot, but inside you're feeling like, boy, I'm like on the back side of the wave. And you want to be surfing, you want to be on that front side of the wave. And that's where the practice comes in. And one last thing too, and this is going to come out in the survival kit. I'd like to see you both empty your pockets, and I want to see if you got a knife.
Yeah. See, I can't travel with one anymore. I used to have one on my keychain, but now airliners can't take it. So
Yeah.
whenever I travel international, I don't have my knife. It drives me
Okay.
crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have one.
It's got to be accessible. It's got to be one-handed operation, open and close. Has to be. And it has to be super sharp. Because there's so many times that you're going to be hanging on to something and you want to be able to reach into your pocket, open it up with one hand. That one's getting a little bit loose, but I can still flick it open, do what I need to do, and then to be able to close it up and back into my pocket.